If you're going to take me, at least let me say goodbye to my children." The words tore out of Mia Reynolds before she could stop them, her voice breaking like glass dropped on marble. She knelt on the cold floor of the mansion, her stained waitress uniform clinging to her trembling body, hands clasped together so tightly her knuckles had turned white. The fluorescent glow from the chandeliers above cast harsh shadows across her face, illuminating everything she wanted to hide. Her left eye was swollen shut, the purple-black bruising spreading across her cheekbone like a map of violence. Handprints marked her throat in dark purple crescents. Blood, dried and dark, crusted the corner of her split lip. Luca Calabrese stood above her, a figure carved from stone and darkness. He was 6'2", broad-shouldered in a suit that cost more than Mia's monthly rent, the fabric the color of midnight. His white dress shirt lay open at the collar, revealing the gold chain he always wore. His hands, scarred and powerful, held the leather wallet between his fingers like it weighed nothing. His eyes were the color of a winter storm, penetrating and cold, and right now they showed absolutely nothing. Not mercy. Not anger. Not recognition. Behind him, Carlo and Enzo stood frozen in the doorway, their hands resting on the guns at their hips. Both men exchanged a look that said the same thing their thoughts screamed. In 15 years of working for Luca Calabrese, the most feared Mafia boss in New England, neither had ever seen anyone kneel before him like this. Not criminals. Not business rivals. Not even family members who had betrayed his trust. And certainly never a woman in a torn apron with $60 shoes held together with duct tape. She doesn't even know what she's done, Carlo thought, his jaw clenching. She doesn't know what that wallet means. The security cameras blinked their red eyes overhead, recording everything. The silence in the mansion was suffocating, the kind of silence that made you aware of your own heartbeat, your own breathing, the small sounds of your body that you tried to suppress. Outside, Boston summer rain hammered against the windows, the sound of it distant and muffled through 3-foot-thick walls. Mia's shoulders shook. Her voice, when it came again, was barely a whisper, shattered like something broken beyond repair. "I'm sorry. I didn't know whose it was. I just found it in the street. It was raining so hard and I found it and I thought." She stopped. Gathered what little breath remained. "Please. My children. Emma is only 5. She still has nightmares. If I disappear, she won't understand. She'll think I left her. She'll think I didn't love her enough to stay." A sound escaped her throat then, something between a sob and a gasp. In her other hand, crumpled like it might dissolve if she held it any tighter, was a piece of paper. The eviction notice. Dated 3 weeks earlier. The deadline circled in red ink. 12 days remaining. She had read that deadline so many times she could see it when she closed her eyes. 12 days to find $125,000 or lose the roof over her children's heads. 12 days. She had $78 in the world. $78 and a waitressing job that paid $7.25 an hour before tips, and the tips had dried up because her boss, Douglas Hale, had spread lies about her through every restaurant in Boston. Had made her a pariah. Had made sure no one would hire her, no one would believe her, no one would help her. So she had become invisible. And invisible people do dangerous things sometimes. Like picking up lost wallets in the rain. Like bringing them to addresses they find in the leather folds, thinking maybe, just maybe, someone would reward her kindness. $50. $100. Something. Anything. Instead, she had brought the wallet of a man who had ordered the deaths of 43 people. Luca's expression did not change. His face remained a mask, unreadable as granite. But something flickered deep in his eyes, something cold and dangerous that made even his own men take a small step backward. He opened the wallet with his thumb, looking down at the photograph inside. A woman's face stared back at him. Beautiful. Dark-haired. Dead for 3 years. "Who sent you?" His voice came out like thunder, low and rolling and absolutely certain of destruction. "No one. I swear. I just found." The wallet. Yes. You said that. He held it up, and the red light of the security camera caught the gold trim. Tell me, Miss Reynolds. How did you know my name? How did you know where I lived? Mia's entire body seized. How did he know her name? She hadn't given it. She hadn't told anyone anything. She had just walked up to this mansion in the rain, her teeth chattering, her eye throbbing where Douglas's fist had connected the night before, and rung the doorbell. There's an ID in there, she whispered. Your driver's license. And I asked the man at the gate. I told him I found something that belonged to the owner and he told me to bring it inside and he called you. 2 minutes passed. Maybe 3. In the tension of that silence, it felt like hours. Finally, Luca looked past her, his eyes locking on Carlo's face. Find out who she is. Full background. Everything. And find out who sent her. Boss, she doesn't look like. I don't care what she looks like. No one finds their way to this house by accident. No one. His footsteps echoed across the marble floor as he turned and walked away, his shadow stretching long and twisted across the ground. The sound of the rain intensified outside, wind rattling the windows, and Mia remained kneeling on that cold floor, her hands still clasped together, her eyes closed, praying to a God she wasn't sure was listening anymore. She didn't know that at that exact moment, in an office building 15 miles away, Cordelia Blackwood was receiving a phone call. She didn't know that the woman on the other end of that line would tell her a name she had spent 3 years trying to destroy. She didn't know that in the next 12 hours, events would be set in motion that would alter the trajectory of her entire life and reveal truths that 2 very powerful people had been trying to hide. Before we continue, drop a like if this story hits you. Share it with someone who needs to hear it and subscribe so you don't miss what's coming tomorrow. Your support means everything and helps us keep creating these stories that move you. Now, let us go back to the beginning, to the moment that started everything. 12 hours earlier. The rain had been falling since dawn, heavy and relentless, turning the Boston streets into rivers of reflected light. Mia Reynolds pushed her cart of cleaning supplies down the narrow hallway of the Riverside Diner, her arms aching in a way that had become so familiar it felt like home. She had been awake for 18 hours. She would be awake for at least 6 more. The diner smelled like it always did at 5 in the morning, burnt coffee, grease from the grill, the faint chemical sweetness of industrial cleaner. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting everything in shades of yellow and gray. The handful of early morning customers sat hunched over their coffee cups like people trying to hide from the world. Mia was 28 years old but looked decades older. Her dark hair, naturally thick and glossy once, now hung limp and tangled, pulled back in a bun so tight it gave her a headache. Her eyes, which had once been warm brown and full of hope, were now hollow, ringed with shadows the makeup she couldn't afford to replace couldn't hide. Her hands were calloused, the cuticles torn from the bleach and hot water, her fingernails cut short and ragged. In her apron pocket, she carried exactly $17.43. She had calculated it this morning, counting the coins and crumpled bills on her kitchen table while Emma slept on the cot beside her. $17.43 to last until Friday. For days away. For days to feed a 5-year-old, keep the electricity on, and figure out how she was going to come up with $125,000 in 12 days or lose everything. The math didn't work. The math had never worked, not since the moment Douglas Hale had decided she was disposable. She wiped down the last table, her movements automatic and hollow, and clocked out at 6:53 in the morning. The rain was heavier now, so thick she could barely see the street ahead. She had no umbrella. She had sold it 3 months ago to pay for Emma's antibiotics. Instead, she pulled her thin grey jacket, held together at the seam with safety pins, tighter around her body and stepped out into the downpour. The water was cold enough to steal her breath. She walked through the streets of Boston, her shoes soaked through, water dripping from her hair into her eyes. The city was starting to wake up around her. Black SUVs with tinted windows prowled the streets. Men in expensive suits hurried past her without seeing her, their eyes fixed on their phones, their expensive shoes clicking against the wet pavement. They existed in a world entirely separate from hers, a world where rain was an inconvenience rather than a disaster. She was nobody. Just another invisible person moving through the city like a ghost. That was when she saw it. The leather wallet lay on the sidewalk in front of the Boston Public Library, half submerged in a puddle. She wouldn't have noticed it if she hadn't stepped in the puddle herself, wouldn't have felt the soft leather against her foot. She picked it up, water running from the sides, and opened it carefully. Inside was a driver's license with a photograph of a man with dark, piercing eyes. Luca Calabrese. An address in the North End, where the old mansion sat behind iron gates that had been there for decades. A gold Amex card. $200 in cash, crisp and clean. $200. Mia's heart hammered in her chest. She could take it. No one would know. The rain was destroying everything, the wallet and its contents, and finders keepers, wasn't that what they said? She could take the money and disappear. Find a new city. Start over. But beneath the money was something else. A photograph of a woman, beautiful and dark-haired, tucked carefully in the leather sleeve. Someone had loved her enough to carry her photo. Someone had loved her very much. Mia thought of Emma. How Emma slept in her arms because she was afraid of sleeping alone. How Emma had asked, last week, if Mommy was going to die like Grandma had. How Emma drew pictures of colors and labeled them things like, yellow for happy days, blue for sad days. She closed the wallet. The address on the driver's license burned in her mind as she walked, the rain continuing to fall around her, the weight of the wallet heavy in her pocket despite its thinness. There was a reward, maybe. $100. Enough for a week of groceries. Enough to buy Emma a new pair of shoes before her feet grew too large for the thrift store one she was wearing now. She made her way north, following the map she pulled up on her phone, watching the battery slowly die. The neighborhoods changed as she walked. The cramped apartment buildings gave way to brownstones, then to gated estates with iron fences and stone walls. The rain pounded harder, and she was shaking by the time she reached the address. The mansion loomed before her, all stone and shadows, windows dark and impenetrable. Security cameras pointed outward like eyes. The gates were closed, but there was an intercom mounted on the stone pillar beside it. She pushed the button. For a long moment, nothing happened. Just the sound of rain, of her own ragged breathing, of the distant sound of traffic on a highway she couldn't see. Then a voice came through the speaker, male and accented, sharp with suspicion. Yes? I found something, Mia said, her voice barely steady. I found a wallet. It belongs to someone who lives here. I want to return it. Silence. Then, you wait there. Someone will come. The gate began to swing open. That was when Mia realized she had made a terrible mistake. She didn't know that the wallet in her pocket belonged to a man who had disappeared from the underworld 3 years ago, a man who had supposedly been eliminated by a rival family, a man whose death had been the beginning of a new power structure in Boston. She didn't know that the photograph of the dead woman was Luca's sister, and that her murder had been the moment something cold and unforgiving had been born inside him. She didn't know that finding his wallet, returning it, walking through his gates and into his mansion would set off a chain of events that would ultimately save her life and destroy 2 people who had dedicated themselves to her destruction. She only knew that she was cold, wet, and desperate enough to hope. The door of the mansion opened. 2 men stepped out, both tall, both dressed in black suits that hung perfectly on their powerful frames. Both of them looked at her like she was a piece of trash that had blown into their path. Come with us, one of them said. She followed them inside. 12 hours before Mia Reynolds walked through those gates, before she held the wallet that would connect her to Luca Calabrese, before the rain and the mansion and the 2 men in black suits, she was standing on the cracked concrete steps of her apartment building with her daughter Emma, trying to smile through the throbbing in her left eye. The Boston summer heat pressed down like a physical weight. Humidity so thick you could choke on it. Her blue tank top clung to her skin, sweat pooling at the base of her spine. In her right hand, she clutched 2 plastic grocery bags that cut deep grooves into her palm. No car. There had never been money for a car. Tremont Street stretched behind her, all the blocks she had walked in this suffocating heat, and her feet ached in a way that made every step feel like stepping on broken glass. Emma sat on the 3rd step, her small frame swallowed by a faded yellow sundress, brown pigtails tied with string because Mia could not afford ribbons. The girl was 6 years old and had learned not to ask why her mother worked so many hours. She had learned not to ask why they moved apartments every few months. She had learned to be quiet, very quiet, the way children do when survival depends on it. "Mama," Emma said, her voice small and uncertain, "why is your eye purple?" Mia set down the grocery bags and knelt beside her daughter. The movement sent a sharp pain through her ribs. 3 of them were probably cracked. She had stopped counting which ribs were broken at what point. The bruising had layered on top of itself, purple bleeding into yellow bleeding into green, a timeline of violence written across her body in shades of hurt. "I walked into a door, baby," Mia said. The lie came automatic. She had perfected it. Mama was clumsy today. Emma studied her face with the serious intensity of a 6-year-old who knew better but had learned not to push. "You are not clumsy. You are very careful." The simplicity of this observation, the truth of it, cracked something in Mia's chest. She pulled Emma close and held her, breathing in the smell of her daughter's hair, which still had that sweet baby shampoo scent even though Emma was not a baby anymore. She was growing up too fast. They both were. Her phone buzzed. Again. The 5th call from the landlord in as many hours. She did not answer. There was nothing to say. In her purse, the eviction notice sat like a grenade with the pin pulled. 12 days. 12 days until she and Emma had to be out of this apartment. 12 days until she had nowhere to sleep, nowhere for her daughter to sleep. The notice read $125,000 in back rent and damages from when Douglas had come through the apartment 3 months ago in a rage, punching walls, breaking the kitchen table, destroying everything he could reach because she had tried to leave him. The police had not come. Douglas had friends on the force. He had made sure of that. Mia had $78 in her purse. It was all that remained after paying for Emma's asthma medication. $78 and 12 days and a daughter who deserved a mother who could protect her. She and Emma went inside the apartment. It was small, 2 rooms and a bathroom where the toilet ran constantly and the sink dripped a rhythm like a countdown. The refrigerator held almost nothing. A half-empty carton of milk that would go bad in 2 days. Some wilted lettuce. A single chicken breast she had salvaged from the restaurant's trash at the end of the night shift, still wrapped in its original packaging, and she had scrubbed it under the hottest water her nerves could stand. Emma did not know that meal had come from garbage. Emma did not know most things. At 4 o'clock, the sky split open. One moment the air was just hot and humid and suffocating. The next moment, lightning branched across the sky like a vein rupturing, and the thunder came so loud and so close that Mia felt it in her teeth. Then the rain. Not gentle rain. Violent rain. Rain that fell in sheets so thick you could barely see 3 feet ahead. The temperature dropped 20 degrees in seconds. The city turned into a blur of grey and white and the constant percussion of water on concrete. Mia had been walking home from the restaurant supply store where she had tried to negotiate with the manager about extending credit for her next shift supplies. The answer had been no. It was always no. She was walking south on Tremont Street trying to shield her face from the rain when she saw it. The wallet. It lay on the rain-soaked sidewalk near the public garden, leather so expensive and fine that it was immediately obvious it did not belong on the street. Not here. Not among the cigarette butts and the gum wrappers and the urban decay. She stopped. The rain hammered down on her. A black SUV passed, going too fast, sending up a spray of filthy water that soaked her from the waist down. She picked up the wallet. It was warm from the recent rain. Heavy. Expensive leather, the kind that cost more than her entire monthly salary. On the front, initials embossed in gold, LC. She did not know what those letters meant. She did not know they belonged to a man who had been declared dead 3 years ago. A man whose supposed elimination had reshaped the entire criminal architecture of New England. She opened the wallet with trembling fingers. $3,000 in cash. She counted it twice. Her hand shook so hard the bills almost dropped back into the rain. $3,000. That was not rent. That was not salvation. That was her life. That was Emma's inhaler for the next 2 years. That was moving costs. That was a deposit on a new apartment with a lock that actually worked. She could take it. No one would ever know. But then she saw the photograph. It was a color photograph, obviously old, obviously precious. A beautiful Asian woman in her 30s, elegant, with high cheekbones and intelligent eyes and a smile that suggested she was about to laugh. On the back, in handwriting that was careful and deliberate, someone had written, "My Hannah." Forever. Someone had loved this woman. Someone had loved her enough to carry her photograph. Someone was looking for this wallet right now, maybe, hoping against hope that someone honest would find it. Someone would be devastated if this photograph was lost. Mia thought about Emma. About how, if anything ever happened to her, Emma would only have that one faded photo Mia kept in her desk drawer. How that single image was everything. How you could not replace photographs. How they were the only proof that someone you loved had actually existed, actually mattered, was not just a ghost. She found a business card inside the wallet. Calabrese Imports. An address in Beacon Hill. A phone number. That was all the address she needed. Beacon Hill was where the real money lived. The kind of money that bought apartments with unbroken windows and refrigerators that did not leak. She should have left it there. Instead, she held the wallet against her chest, pulled her shirt over it for protection against the rain, and ran. The thunderstorm followed her through the streets. Rain like a scream. Wind that tore at her clothes. She ran from Tremont toward Beacon Hill, her feet pounding on wet concrete, her breath coming in hard gasps that made her cracked ribs shriek with every exhale. She ran past closed storefronts and empty streets. She ran past a man crouched under a newspaper, past 2 teenagers sharing a cigarette under an awning, past all the small dramas of the city and into the wealthier neighborhoods where the buildings got taller and the cars got newer and the sense that she did not belong grew heavier with every block. The address led her to an iron gate. Beyond the gate stood a mansion. Not a house. A mansion. 3 stories of brick and wealth, with ivy crawling up the north wall and windows that glowed with golden light despite the darkness of the storm. A driveway that curved through grounds that went on for what seemed like acres in the middle of the city. The kind of property that required both money and power to maintain in a place like Boston, where every inch of land was fought for. Mia approached the gate. Her clothes were soaked. Her hair hung in wet ropes down her back. The bruise on her eye had started to swell again from the exertion. She looked like a drowned animal. Worse. She looked like exactly what she was. Desperate. Dangerous to no one. A woman with nothing. She pushed the button on the intercom mounted on the stone pillar beside the gate. For a long moment, nothing happened. Just the sound of rain, the hum of the intercom's electronic waiting, the distant sound of a car engine on a street she could not see. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Then a voice came through the speaker. Male. Accented. Sharp with suspicion. Yes? I found something, Mia said. Her voice came out barely steady. I found a wallet. It belongs to someone who lives here. I want to return it. Silence. The rain continued its assault on everything. A drop of water dripped from her nose. She was shaking, though whether from cold or fear she could not have said. You wait there. Someone will come, the voice said. The gate began to swing open. Mia realized, in that moment, that she had made a terrible mistake. She did not know that the wallet in her pocket belonged to a man who had disappeared from the underworld 3 years ago. A man who had supposedly been eliminated by a rival family in a power play that had reshaped Boston's entire criminal structure. A man whose supposed death had changed everything. She did not know that the photograph of the dead woman was Luca Calabrese's sister, Hannah, and that her murder 7 years ago had been the moment something cold and unforgiving had crystallized in his heart. She did not know that walking through these gates with this wallet would set off a chain of events that no one could control. Events that would ultimately save her life. Events that would destroy two people who had dedicated themselves to her destruction with the kind of patience that only true malice possesses. She only knew that she was cold and wet and desperate enough to hope. The door of the mansion opened. 2 men stepped out into the rain. Both tall. Both broad-shouldered. Both wearing black suits that hung perfectly on their powerful frames, expensive enough to cost more than a year of her old rent. Both of them looked at her like she was a piece of trash that had blown into their path. The taller one spoke, his voice hard and measured. "Come with us." She followed them inside. The marble hallway stretched before her like a cathedral of wealth, cold and infinite. Crystal chandeliers hung 3 stories above, casting fractured light across floors so polished they reflected her broken reflection back at her like an accusation. Mia stood dripping rainwater onto surfaces that cost more than her annual salary, her swollen eye throbbing with each heartbeat, her clothes clinging to her body like a second skin of shame. Carlo and Enzo had brought her inside without a word, their black suits immaculate, their expressions carved from stone. They moved like men accustomed to violence, every gesture economical, every step deliberate. The taller one, Enzo, had taken one look at her face and simply nodded toward the staircase. No questions. No judgment. Just movement, swift and certain. A door opened at the top of the landing. Luca Calabrese descended the stairs like a man descending from another world entirely. He wore a charcoal suit at 3 in the morning, the kind of suit that required a tailor who worked by appointment only, a white shirt open at the collar revealing the strong line of his throat. His dark hair was swept back from a face that seemed carved from granite, sharp angles, prominent bones, a scar running from just below his left eye to his jawline like a white blade drawn across his skin. He was tall, perhaps 6'2", with the broad shoulders of a man who carried the weight of empires on his back. His eyes were the color of storm clouds, and when they fixed on her face, Mia felt something cold and dangerous stir in his chest. He reached the bottom of the staircase and moved toward her with the deliberate slowness of a predator. Not threatening. Not yet. Just assessing. "Who did this to you?" His voice was deep and solid like an oath, each word measured and placed with intention. Mia's legs trembled. She could not speak. She could not think beyond the sound of Emma breathing softly in her arms, beyond the knowledge that Douglas and Cordelia were still out there, still hunting, still determined to erase her from existence. "I am sorry," she whispered, the words fragmenting like broken glass. "I did not know where else to go. I returned your wallet yesterday. Please do not call the police. They will not help me. His friend is a sergeant and he—" Luca cut her off with a single raised hand. "Sit down. Carlo, get the doctor. Enzo, take the child upstairs. Second guest room. She will be safe there." Mia pulled Emma closer, panic flooding through her veins like ice water. "No, please. I just need to rest for an hour. We will leave. I promise we will not be any trouble." "You are bleeding on my floor," Luca said quietly. "You will sit. You will let the doctor examine you. Then you will tell me who did this." There was no anger in his voice. That was what terrified her most. No rage, no impatience. Just absolute certainty that what he commanded would be obeyed. Enzo gently took Emma from her arms, cradling the sleeping child with surprising gentleness for a man whose shoulder holster was visible beneath his suit jacket. Emma did not wake. She had learned, over her 4 years of life, that sleep was a refuge from the world's cruelty. Mia sank into a leather chair that swallowed her whole, her body convulsing with suppressed sobs. A doctor arrived within 15 minutes, a grey-haired man with kind eyes who asked no questions, simply brought a medical bag and began his examination with efficient, gentle hands. He cleaned the gash above her eye, applied antiseptic that stung like fire, confirmed the concussion, the cracked rib, the defensive wound scoring her forearms where she had tried to shield herself from Douglas's fists. Luca stood in the doorway throughout, his silhouette backlit by the marble hallway's light. Carlo stood beside him, and in that moment, something shifted in the lieutenant's understanding of the man he served. In 15 years of witnessing the boss's calculated cruelty, his absolute command, his refusal to show weakness, Carlo had never seen Luca Calabrese stand still for someone who was not his blood. When the doctor finished, he wrapped her ribs with careful efficiency and left a bottle of painkillers on the table beside her. "Rest," he said. "The rib will heal. The eye will fade. The fear will take longer." Luca waited until the doctor had departed before he spoke. "Tell me," he said simply. And Mia, broken open by exhaustion and pain and the knowledge that she had nowhere left to run, told him everything. Douglas Hale. Ex-boyfriend. The relationship had lasted 3 years before his true nature emerged like something surfacing from deep water. The violence had started small, a shove, a harsh word, a fist slammed against a wall beside her head. Then it accelerated. She left him. He stalked her. She reported him to the police. 12 times. 12 reports. 12 times nothing happened. His friend Sergeant Mike Torres buried the complaints like bodies in unmarked graves. Then 6 months ago, Cordelia Blackwood entered the story like a curse that could not be erased. Her brother asked me on a date, Mia whispered, her voice barely a whisper. I declined. It was nothing. But Cordelia took it as an insult. She decided to punish me. She told every restaurant owner in Boston that I was unstable. She told landlords I was under investigation for child neglect. She posted things online. She made phone calls. She convinced the world I was garbage. Luca's jaw clenched. His fingers curled into fists. I lost my apartment. I lost my jobs. I lost everything. I have $78 in my pocket. I have an eviction notice with a 12-day deadline written in red ink. I owe $125,000 to landlords and creditors. I have no one. No family. No friends. No one willing to help because they are terrified of her. She is connected. She has power. And I am just a waitress with a daughter who depends on me. Luca turned away so she could not see his face. His shoulders were rigid, his fists clenched at his sides so tightly his knuckles had turned white. Why did you return the wallet? His voice was barely audible, each word seeming to cost him something. Mia hesitated. The truth seemed so small, so insignificant against the enormity of her circumstances. The photograph, she said. I saw the woman's face. The way she was smiling. Someone loved her. That was clear. I know what it is like to lose everything, to have nothing left. I could not take her memory from someone else. Even if I was desperate. Luca turned back to face her, and for one moment, just one, his mask slipped. His dark eyes were wet, his expression fractured like glass. He crossed the distance between them and knelt beside her chair, his expensive suit creasing against the marble, his powerful frame suddenly diminished by something deeper than physical pain. My wife's name was Hannah, he said quietly. She died 3 years ago because I trusted the wrong person. She believed in helping people who had no one else. She believed that mercy was not weakness. I learned that lesson too late to save her. I will not learn it twice. Mia stared at him, unable to process what was happening. You will stay here, he continued, his voice hardening into something absolute. You and your daughter. You will rest. You will heal. And then we will deal with the people who did this to you. They will answer for every bruise, every tear, every night you spent terrified and alone. Why would you help me? Mia whispered. I am nobody. I have nothing to offer you. Luca stood, straightening his suit, his composure reassembling itself like a fortress being rebuilt. Because the people who did this believed you were nobody, and that belief needs to be corrected. By dawn, every police officer in this city will know that you belong to me now. By nightfall, Douglas Hale will understand what he has done. And Cordelia Blackwood will learn what it costs to destroy an innocent woman. He turned toward the doorway, then paused. Your daughter is safe. You are safe. You will want for nothing while you are under my roof. Tomorrow, you will begin rebuilding your life. But tonight, you rest. He left, Carlo following silently behind him. Mia sat alone in a leather chair, surrounded by more wealth than she had ever imagined, and for the first time in months, she allowed herself to breathe. 3 blocks away, in a brownstone mansion on Louisburg Square, Douglas Hale was still drinking. Cordelia Blackwood sat across from him, her blonde hair perfectly styled, her manicured nails drumming against the armrest of an imported Italian sofa. She wore a Chanel suit and pearls, and her smile was the smile of a woman who had never been told no. She went into that mansion, Cordelia said softly. The one on Beacon Hill. The one that belongs to, she paused, tilting her head. Actually, I am not sure who it belongs to. Very private. Very exclusive. Douglas's eyes narrowed. I do not care who she is fucking. She is mine. And I will bring her back. Cordelia's smile widened. Of course you will. But perhaps we should find out who lives in that mansion first. A woman does not run to a stranger's home. There is a connection. And if there is a connection. She let the sentence hang, unfinished, pregnant with possibility. The rain continued outside, drumming against the windows like impatient fingers, like a warning that neither of them heeded. The morning light filtered through the tall windows of the mansion library, pale and thin, like hope that had not yet learned to trust itself. Mia sat in a leather chair so expensive it probably cost more than her entire apartment had cost to furnish, her fingers trembling as she held the fountain pen. The stationery was cream-colored, embossed with initials she did not recognize. She had been writing and rewriting the same letter for 40 minutes. Her daughter Emma played in the garden 3 floors below, visible through the window as a small figure in a yellow dress, Enzo kneeling beside her at the edge of a koi pond. The sight of the dangerous man teaching her child how to scatter breadcrumbs for the fish made something crack open in Mia's chest. This was not real. None of this was real. The letter lay in front of her, words scratched out and rewritten so many times the paper was beginning to tear. Luca, I cannot stay. She had started with that. The only true sentence. Through the library door, she could hear the mansion moving around her, footsteps on marble, voices speaking in low Italian, the sound of a telephone ringing and being answered in the room next door. She did not belong here. She had stumbled into this place like a character in someone else's story, and now she was contaminating it with her own debris of abuse and poverty and ruin. Cordelia Blackwood knew where she was. Douglas Hale knew where she was. And they would come, because people like that did not accept rejection or failure. They came back. They always came back. She finished the letter with shaking hands. I have feelings for you I have no right to feel. I hope you find peace. Thank you for giving me one safe night. I am sorry I brought danger to your door. Mia. She folded the letter 3 times, creasing each fold with the precision of someone performing a ritual. Then she moved to his desk, a massive walnut surface with nothing on it but a telephone and a single framed photograph. She did not look at the photograph. She could not bear to know who it was. She left the letter centered on the desk where he would see it immediately. The next 30 minutes were a blur of movement and decision. She packed Emma's clothes into the small suitcase she had arrived with, moving quickly, quietly, like a thief stealing her daughter back from safety. She found Emma in the garden, muddy up to her knees, laughing as Enzo showed her how the fish opened their mouths at the surface. Enzo looked up as Mia approached. Something in his expression shifted, he saw the suitcase and he understood immediately. Mrs. Reynolds, he said carefully. Not a question. I need to take her, Mia whispered. I need to take her now. Enzo rose slowly, the koi fish forgotten. Emma reached up for Mia's hand, still laughing, completely unaware that her world was about to become small again, cramped again, unsafe again. "You will wait," Enzo said. It was not a suggestion. But his eyes were sad. "You will give him a chance to." "I cannot," Mia said, and she was already moving, already pulling Emma away from the garden, toward the service entrance where Carlo had taken his shift change. "I cannot do that to him." The South Station smelled like diesel fuel and human desperation. 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting everything in a sickly yellow glow. The arrivals and departures board flickered. Providence, New York, Philadelphia, all the places she could disappear into and become invisible again. Mia held Emma on her lap on a hard plastic bench, the child exhausted from the car ride, leaning against her shoulder. The suitcase sat at her feet. In her pocket was her last $78, now reduced to $62.30 after the bus tickets to Providence. 2 one-way tickets. No return. Never return. Boarding for Providence line, all passengers. The announcement crackled over the intercom. Around her, people shuffled toward the gate. An old woman with a walking cane. A man with 3 children. A young couple with a dog in a carrier. Nobody looked at her twice. She was exactly what she had always been, nobody, just another piece of debris the world carried and discarded. Emma stirred. "Mama, my legs hurt." Mia pressed her lips to the top of her daughter's head and breathed in the scent of strawberry shampoo and childhood, trying to memorize it, to hold it, to preserve this last moment before she became exactly what Douglas had said she was. A kidnapper. A criminal. Unfit. Undeserving. Invisible. She stood, lifted Emma onto her hip despite the ache in her back, and reached for the suitcase. That was when the crowd simply parted. People moved out of the way without being asked, the way water parts for something heavier, something denser, something that displaces space simply by existing in it. Luca Calabrese walked through the center of South Station like he owned it, like the airport was his living room and these travelers were simply guests in his home. Black suit, open white shirt, his jaw set in a way that made the fluorescent light seem dim by comparison. He stopped directly in front of her. Mia's breath caught. Emma stirred, reaching for him instinctively. "You wrote me a letter," he said. His voice was steady, low, like granite. Like something that had already been decided by geological forces millions of years ago. Mia could not speak. Her throat had closed. "I read it 3 times, he continued. He did not look at Emma. He looked only at Mia, and in his eyes was something that terrified her far more than Douglas's fists ever had. It was recognition. It was the look of someone who had found something he did not know he was missing. "The part about your feelings. You should not be here," Mia whispered. "If they know you helped me." "They know," he said. He sat down on the bench next to her, completely indifferent to the stairs, to the way the crowd had stopped moving, the way people were filming on their phones. "Cordelia Blackwood has connections everywhere. She knows you are here. She knows you came to me." The bottom of Mia's stomach fell away. "But what you do not understand," Luca continued, "is that I read your letter not as a threat, but as a choice. You had $78 and a daughter and a safe place to stay, and you chose to leave because you were trying to protect me. In my entire life, nobody has ever chosen to protect me." He reached over and took the suitcase from her hand with a gentleness that made her want to cry. "My brother sold my family to our enemies for $2 million, he said quietly. Hannah died because of his betrayal. I learned that loyalty is rare, that mercy is a luxury, that trust is something only fools indulge in. So I built an empire of people who served me because they feared me, or because they owed me, or because they had no other choice. And I was content with that. I did not need more." Emma had fallen asleep against Mia's chest, her small hand curled against Mia's collarbone. "But you," he said, and something in his voice shifted, became something softer, something that sounded almost like devastation. "You found $3,000 in a wallet and you returned it because of a photograph. A stranger's grief mattered more to you than your own survival. That is not a character flaw, Mia. That is not a reason to run. That is a reason to stay. She turned to look at him, and what she saw in his face was a man who had spent so long being feared that he did not know how to be anything else. And now, in this moment, under the fluorescent lights of South Station, he was trying. They will hurt you, she said. No, he said simply. They will not. Because I am going to end this. 3 blocks away from the mansion, in a brownstone on Louisburg Square, Douglas Hale was still drinking. The bourbon sat in a crystal glass on a mahogany side table, his third since morning. His hands were shaking, whether from rage or alcohol or fear, he could no longer tell. The contract he had taken out on Mia was still unsigned, still sitting on his desk, waiting for him to find the courage to make it permanent. To make her permanent, gone, erased, removed from the equation entirely. Cordelia Blackwood stood at the window, her blonde hair perfectly arranged, her Chanel suit immaculate despite the early hour, her phone pressed to her ear. Yes, I am certain, she was saying into the receiver. I will have the paperwork filed by noon. A custody violation is a felony, and if we can prove she is being harbored by a known criminal, the judge will have no choice but to issue an arrest warrant. She paused, listening. The mansion belongs to Luca Calabrese. Yes, that Luca Calabrese. But what he does not realize is that I have a friend in the district attorney's office. Very influential. Very motivated. By this evening, Mia Reynolds will be arrested, her daughter will be placed in protective custody, and Mr. Calabrese will learn that there are consequences for interfering with people like us. She hung up the phone and turned to Douglas, her smile sharp as a blade. It is handled, she said. By 6 o'clock tonight, we will have her back. Douglas nodded, raising his glass. Neither of them heard the knock on the window. Neither of them saw the shadows gathering outside, 12 figures in dark clothing, moving like smoke, like ghosts with a purpose. The lights in the warehouse cut out all at once. Douglas's bourbon glass shattered against the concrete floor. The darkness was absolute, pressing against his eyes like physical weight. He heard Cordelia's scream, sharp and sudden, then cut short. His own voice, calling out, "Who is there? Who the fuck is there?" sounded small and foreign in the blackness. Then the flashlights came on, 6 of them, held at chest height, creating shadows that looked like monsters. A voice spoke, calm and professional, the voice of someone performing a job they had done before. Douglas Hale. You made a mistake. He saw the figures then, just outlines, just suggestions of human shapes. Their faces were covered. Their hands were steady. I have friends, Douglas said, backing away, his voice becoming something desperate and thin. I have police connections. If you know who I am, you know. One of them laughed. Just a soft laugh, but it contained no mercy. Your friends cannot help you, the voice said. Not where you are going. Hands grabbed him, professional and efficient, pulling his arms behind his back. He felt zip ties cutting into his wrists and he began to scream, truly scream, like the sound could save him, like noise could be a weapon against the darkness. Cordelia tried to run. She made it 3 steps before they caught her. 3 steps in her expensive heels across the concrete. Her manicured nails scraped against the wall as they pulled her backward. Her perfect composure shattered like glass. I will pay you, she gasped. Whatever you want. I have money. Connections. I will give you anything. You had connections, one of them said. You do not anymore. The van doors slammed shut. The warehouse went silent except for the sound of the engine starting, the vehicles pulling away, carrying Douglas and Cordelia into a future that no longer existed, a present that was already becoming the past. By the time the police arrived at the empty warehouse 30 minutes later, there was nothing left but overturned furniture and broken glass. It would take 3 days for the news to reach the media. It would take 5 for the federal investigation to expand across 3 states. It would take 2 weeks for the bank accounts to be frozen, for the assets to be seized, for the lies to be untangled completely. But Cordelia and Douglas Hale, the two people who had destroyed Mia Reynolds, simply ceased to exist. They were not in hospitals. They were not in local jails. They were not in state penitentiaries. They had simply vanished, like smoke, like bad dreams when the sun rises. And in the mansion on Beacon Hill, Luca Calabrese deleted a single text message, delivered. Debt settled. And then he went to find Mia, who was sitting in the library, still holding the letter she had written hours before, wondering if she had already disappeared, if this was the moment she found out she was dead. He took the letter from her hands and let it fall to the floor. "You are not going anywhere," he said, and his voice sounded like a vow. 3 days had passed since the warehouse went silent. 3 days since Douglas and Cordelia simply ceased to exist. Mia woke in the guest room of the mansion on Beacon Hill with winter sunlight pouring through windows the size of doors, and for the first time in 2 years, she had not screamed herself awake. Emma lay beside her in the oversized bed, still sleeping, her small hand tucked against her mother's chest like a prayer answered. Mia did not move. She lay there counting her daughter's breaths, in, out, the rhythm of a life she had almost lost, the rhythm of a future that suddenly belonged to her again. Downstairs, the morning was quiet. The kind of quiet that comes after thunder has passed, when the sky is still grey but the lightning has stopped. Luca sat in the breakfast room reading the newspaper, his black coffee steaming beside him, untouched. He wore a charcoal sweater that cost more than Mia's entire childhood, but his face was unguarded in a way she had not seen before. The newspaper crackled as he turned the page. Front page, smaller than the headline about 3 senators caught in a bribery scandal, socialite Cordelia Blackwood missing, family offers reward. Below that, almost forgotten, local man Douglas Hale vanishes, police investigating. Mia's hand trembled as she gripped the back of the chair. She read the words 3 times, waiting for them to transform into something else, some trick of the light, some cruelty she had not yet learned to anticipate. "Are they?" Her voice came out as barely a whisper, the sound of someone not quite believing permission to speak. Luca did not look up from the paper. "Gone. Permanently. They will never touch you again." She should have felt relief. Relief was what people felt when the danger ended, when the wolf was finally driven from the fold. Instead, Mia felt untethered, as if gravity itself had simply given up. She sat across from him, her hands folded in her lap like a child waiting for punishment. "I do not know how to thank you," she said. Luca folded the newspaper with deliberate care and set it aside. His dark eyes met hers, and in them she saw something that looked like grief. "You already did. You returned what mattered most to me when you had every reason to take it." "The wallet," Mia whispered. "The memory." Luca's voice was steady, like stone. "My wife believed people were good until proven otherwise. I stopped believing that when my brother betrayed me. You reminded me she was not naive. You reminded me she was right." Silence stretched between them like a held breath. Through the open doorway, Carlo passed carrying a box of files, his eyes carefully averted, giving them privacy the way a man learns to do when he works for someone who rarely asks for anything but protection. "What happens now?" Mia asked. Luca stood and walked to the window. Outside, the city was waking up. Traffic moving. People going to jobs they hated, to lives they had already given up on changing. "That depends. You can leave. I will set you up in a new city. New identity. Cash to start over. $100,000. Emma will never have to know fear again. $100,000. A number so large it barely seemed real. Mia could rent an apartment for 5 years. She could put Emma in college. She could disappear. Or, she asked. Luca turned from the window. In the morning light, the scar running from his temple to his cheekbone looked like a knife wound, an old violence he carried as easily as other men carry wedding rings. "Or you stay. I have a position. Property manager for the estate. Salary $85,000 a year. Benefits. An apartment on the grounds. Emma goes to the private school in Brookline. She will have tutors. She will have piano lessons if she wants them. She will have everything. And what do you get? Mia asked. Luca crossed the room. He sat on the edge of the table, deliberately casual, deliberately close. In that letter you wrote, the one you were going to leave at the bus station, you told me you had feelings you had no right to feel. I have the same feelings. I have not let anyone close in 3 years. I am not good at this. My world is dangerous. The things I have done cannot be undone. The people I employ are not good men. But if you are willing to try, so am I. Mia's eyes filled with tears. This man. This dangerous, broken man who had erased her tormentors from existence, who could have simply paid her off and sent her away, was asking her to stay. Was asking her to trust him. Was asking her to believe that someone like her, nobody from nothing, a waitress who counted coins and rationed food, could be worth more than the empire he had built. She reached across the table and took his hand. It was the first time she had initiated touch, and the moment her skin met his, she felt something cold and ancient inside him shift. His hand was warm. His grip was careful, as if he was afraid she might break, as if he had not spent 20 years breaking other people for less than this. I will stay, she said. Later that day, Carlo drove them to the cottage on the eastern edge of the property. 2 bedrooms, fully furnished, windows overlooking a garden that would be beautiful in spring. New curtains hung in every room. The refrigerator was stocked with fresh food, milk, bread, cheese. In Emma's room, a bookshelf stood loaded with picture books, and a toy box overflowed with stuffed animals and blocks. Emma ran through the apartment squealing with delight, her voice bouncing off walls that had never heard a child laugh before. Mia stood in the doorway of her daughter's new room, watching her spin in slow circles, arms outstretched, unable to contain the joy of space and safety and the simple miracle of a place that belonged to her. The boss did the room himself, Carlo said from behind her. Though do not tell him I told you. Mia turned. Carlo's scarred face was soft with something that looked like tenderness. In 15 years, I have never seen him do anything like that. 3 hours later, when Emma had finally exhausted herself playing and fallen asleep across the new bed, Carlo appeared at Mia's door. The boss wants to see you in his office. The walk back to the main house felt like walking into a storm. Mia's heart moved at the base of her throat. The office was on the 3rd floor, a room that felt more like a museum of wealth than a place where actual work happened. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city. Dark wood paneling. The smell of expensive leather and old money. Luca stood at his desk, waiting. He held an envelope. Open it, he said. Inside, the eviction notice. The $22,000 foreclosure demand with the 12-day deadline written in red ink, the paper that had woken her in the middle of the night for 6 months. It was stamped across the front in bold letters, paid in full. The date was 3 days ago, the day after Douglas and Cordelia disappeared. You did not have to, Mia began. You are under my protection now, Luca said. That means you do not carry debts that were never yours to begin with. He pulled out another document. Legal papers, already processed, already signed. Custody order. Full parental rights for Mia Reynolds, no contest, no dispute. Douglas Hale's claims to Emma had simply evaporated, as if they had never existed at all. Mia broke. She broke like glass under pressure, like ice melting into water, like a person who had been holding herself together through sheer force of will finally remembering what it meant to fall. Luca, awkward with emotion, stood and moved around the desk. He hesitated, a moment of terrible uncertainty crossed his face, and then he pulled her into his arms. She collapsed against his chest, her sob soaking into his expensive suit, 2 years of terror and desperation and the crushing weight of survival finally leaving her body. He held her. His hand on the back of her head, his other arm around her waist, holding her like she was something precious, something worth protecting, something that mattered more than empires or power or the darkness he had spent his whole life building. Carlo and Enzo watched from the doorway, stunned into complete silence. In 15 years of working for Dominic Luca Calabrese, they had never witnessed him show tenderness to anyone. They exchanged a look. Something had shifted. Something fundamental had changed, and there was no going back. The rest of the afternoon dissolved into practical things. Mia met with the property manager who would be training her. She and Emma walked through the estate as the sun began its descent, golden light turning everything soft. At 5 o'clock, Emma asked for dinner, and Luca insisted they eat together in the smaller dining room, not the grand one. It was intimate and warm, and when Emma reached across the table to hold his hand while they waited for dessert, Luca looked at Mia with an expression that could have been fear or could have been the beginning of faith. That night, Mia tucked Emma into her new bed. Her daughter fell asleep with her hand still wrapped around her mother's finger, and Mia sat in the dark of that unfamiliar room, knowing that tomorrow would bring new challenges, new adjustments, new risks. Luca's world was still dangerous. The men who worked for him were still men who did terrible things. But for the first time since Douglas Hale had wrapped his hands around her throat and convinced her that she deserved the pain, Mia Reynolds believed that she might actually survive. More than that, she believed she might actually live. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to the channel, like and share this video with the people you love. Every comment you leave is a precious source of motivation. We wish all of you good health, a joyful life, and days filled with peace.